The stars had always seemed peaceful to humanity. For thousands of years, people looked up at the night sky and dreamed of what might be out there. They built telescopes and sent probes into the darkness. They listened for signals and hoped they were not alone. But when the answer finally came, it was not the friendly greeting they had imagined. The Valoran hegemony had ruled the Orion arm of the galaxy for 12,000 years. Their empire stretched across 1,000 star systems. Their warships were beautiful and deadly, made of living crystal that could heal itself after battle. No species had ever defeated them. No species had even come close. The Valoran looked at the galaxy and saw only two kinds of beings: themselves and everyone else who served them. When their scout ships first detected radio signals coming from a small blue planet, they sent the information back to their homeworld. The High Council studied the transmissions with mild curiosity. They saw a species that had only recently learned to split the atom. They saw primitive rockets and fragile space stations. They saw creatures that still fought wars among themselves over patches of dirt. The Council's decision was quick and simple. These humans would make acceptable workers for the mining colonies. Nothing more. Ambassador Kelrath was chosen to deliver the message. He was tall, even by Valoran standards, with 4 arms and wings that shimmered like oil on water. His compound eyes could see in spectrums that humans could not even imagine. He had served the hegemony for 300 years and had delivered similar ultimatums to 17 other species. None of them had refused. None of them had dared. His ship arrived at Earth's orbit on a Tuesday morning. It was a small diplomatic vessel, elegant and fast, designed to impress primitive species with its beauty. Kelrath did not bother to bring warships. He did not think he would need them. The humans sent a shuttle to meet him. It was an ugly thing made of metal and ceramics. Nothing like the smooth curves of Valoran design. Kelrath felt a small wave of disgust as he stepped aboard. The interior smelled strange, and the gravity was slightly wrong. These creatures clearly had much to learn about proper spacecraft construction. Admiral Daniel Harper was waiting for him at the orbital station. He was a man in his 50s with gray hair and calm eyes. Behind him stood Secretary of Defense Lisa Thornton, a woman with sharp features and a sharper mind. They both wore formal uniforms and showed no fear. This annoyed Kelrath slightly. Most species trembled when they first saw Valoran. These humans simply watched him with quiet attention. "Welcome to human space," Daniel said. His voice was steady. "We have prepared a meeting room for our discussion." Kelrath waved one of his 4 hands dismissively. "That will not be necessary. This will not take long." He activated a holographic display that floated in the air between them. It showed the Valoran hegemony's territory, a vast stretch of stars that made human space look like a single grain of sand on a beach. "Your species has been evaluated," Kelrath said. "The High Council has determined that you are suitable for integration into the hegemony. You will surrender your sovereignty immediately. You will dismantle your military vessels. You will accept your place as a protected client species. In return, we will allow you to continue existing." Daniel and Lisa exchanged a glance. Neither of them spoke. Kelrath continued. "You have 60 of your solar cycles to comply. After that time, our fleet will arrive to enforce our will. Any resistance will be met with complete destruction. This is not a negotiation. This is a notification." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then Lisa stepped forward. "And if we refuse?" she asked. Kelrath made a sound that might have been laughter. "No species refuses. We have conquered races that were building starships when your ancestors were living in caves. Your technology is primitive. Your population is small. You have no allies, no defenses, and no hope. Refusal is not an option you possess." He turned to leave, his wings catching the light as he moved. 60 cycles, he repeated. Use them wisely. Say goodbye to your freedom. And say goodbye to your freedom. Then he was gone, his ship vanishing into the darkness between stars. Daniel watched the empty space where the vessel had been. His hands were steady, but his mind was racing. He had known this day might come. For 30 years, Ever since the first alien probe had been captured in secret, humanity's leaders had prepared for this possibility. They had hoped for peaceful contact. They had planned for something else entirely. "Get me a secure channel to Mars," he said quietly. Lisa nodded. "Project Leviathan? It's time to wake them up." Deep beneath the red surface of Mars, in shipyards that did not officially exist, something ancient and massive began to stir. For 3 decades, humanity's greatest minds had worked in absolute secrecy. They had studied the captured alien probe and learned its secrets. They had reverse-engineered its technology and then improved upon it. They had built things that the galaxy had never seen before. The workers in the underground hangars felt the vibrations as power systems came online for the first time. Lights flickered along hulls that stretched for kilometers. Reactors that had been cold and silent began to burn with the fury of small stars. Dr. Nathan Cole stood in the control center and watched the readouts on his screens. He was a thin man with tired eyes and hands that never stopped moving. He had given his entire life to this project. He had missed birthdays and holidays and the funerals of friends, all for this moment. "Status report," he called out. "All 7 vessels showing green across the board," his assistant replied. "They're ready, sir. They've been ready for years." Nathan allowed himself a small smile. The Valoran thought they were dealing with primitives. They thought humanity would kneel and accept servitude. They had no idea what was waiting for them in the darkness. 60 days, the alien had said. Humanity would need far less than that. In orbit above Earth, Daniel Harper stood at the window of the station and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, a fleet of crystal warships was preparing to enslave his people. Somewhere out there, an empire of arrogant conquerors was laughing at the thought of human resistance. They would not be laughing for long. "Send word to all military commands," he said. "Condition Alpha. This is not a drill." The message went out at the speed of light, reaching every ship, every base, every hidden installation in human space. And everywhere it reached, men and women began preparing for war. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity did not kneel. The year was 2089 when everything changed. A mining vessel near the asteroid belt detected something strange on its sensors. The crew thought it was a malfunction at first. Objects did not move like that. Objects did not change direction without thrust or slow down without friction. But this thing did. They captured it 3 days later. It was small, about the size of a car, and it was clearly not made by human hands. Its surface was smooth and dark, covered in symbols that no one could read. When scientists finally opened it, they found technology that made their best computers look like stone tools. The world governments made a decision that night. They would tell no one. The discovery would remain the greatest secret in human history. Because the probe carried something else, besides technology. It carried a message, recorded in 100 different languages, most of them completely unknown. The message was simple. You have been found. Prepare to serve. From that day forward, humanity began building in secret. They could not match the aliens in elegance or efficiency. They did not have thousands of years of spacefaring experience. But humans had something else. They had fear. And fear made them creative in terrible ways. Dr. Nathan Cole was 25 years old when he joined Project Leviathan. He was a genius in materials science, recruited straight from his university with promises of unlimited funding and the chance to save his species. The first time he saw the plans for what they intended to build, he thought it was impossible. Now, 30 years later, he walked through a hangar carved from the rock beneath Mars and looked up at the proof that impossible was just a word. The Colossus hung above him like a metal god. She was 8 kilometers long from bow to stern and nearly 2 kilometers wide at her thickest point. Her hull was made of reinforced titanium alloy, layered with ceramics and experimental armor that could shrug off nuclear weapons. She was not beautiful. She was not elegant. She looked like a fortress that someone had taught to fly. Her weapons covered every surface. Railgun batteries that could accelerate projectiles to a fraction of light speed. Missile pods carrying warheads of every type humanity had ever invented. Energy weapons copied from the alien probe and scaled up to terrifying size. Point defense systems that could fill the space around her with walls of fire. She was designed for one purpose, and one purpose only: to destroy everything in front of her. Nathan placed his hand on the cold metal of her hull. He had helped design her. He had watched her grow from blueprints to reality over 3 decades. Now she would finally serve her purpose. "She's beautiful," said a voice behind him. He turned to find Lieutenant Commander Megan Price standing there. She was young, maybe 30, with short dark hair and eyes that never seemed to rest. She was one of the fighter pilots assigned to the Colossus, and she would lead her squadron into battle when the time came. "Beautiful is not the word I would use," Nathan replied. "Terrifying. Maybe. Necessary," Megan laughed. "Same thing, in my experience." She looked up at the massive ship with something like love in her eyes. Nathan understood the feeling. They had all given so much for this project. They had sacrificed normal lives, families, futures, all for the chance to protect their species from the darkness between stars. "Is it true?" Megan asked. "The aliens gave us 60 days? 58 now. They're expecting us to surrender. And we won't." It was not a question. Nathan shook his head. "We have 7 of these ships: the Colossus, the Titan, the Defiance, the Goliath, the Harbinger, the Ironclad, and the Retribution. Each one took 10 years to build. Each one could destroy a small moon. The aliens have no idea they exist." Megan smiled, and there was nothing friendly in it. "I almost feel sorry for them." Across the solar system, the other megaships were waking up. On Europa, buried beneath kilometers of ice, the Titan's crew ran through final system checks. In the hollowed-out shell of a captured asteroid, the Goliath's reactors burned bright for the first time. Near the rings of Saturn, the Harbinger and the Defiance moved slowly out of their hiding places, their massive forms drifting like predators emerging from deep water. Admiral Daniel Harper reviewed the fleet status from his command center on Earth. 7 ships, 7 impossible weapons that humanity had built in secret while the galaxy thought they were primitives. It would have to be enough. His communications officer spoke up. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Ironclad. They're reporting all systems operational." "That's the last one," Daniel said. "All 7 ships are ready." He stood and walked to the window. Outside, the Earth turned slowly, blue and green and beautiful. 8 billion people lived down there, going about their daily lives, most of them having no idea how close they were to losing everything. "Begin fleet assembly," he ordered. "I want all 7 ships at Rally Point Omega within 30 days. We'll meet the Valoran in deep space, far from Earth. No matter what happens, we keep the fighting away from home." "Yes, sir." Lisa Thornton entered the room, carrying a tablet with the latest intelligence reports. "The Valoran fleet is assembling on the edge of their territory. 247 warships, according to our long-range sensors. How do they compare to our ships?" Lisa pulled up the analysis. "Their largest vessel is about 200 meters long. Our smallest ship is 8 kilometers. In terms of raw firepower, it's not even close. One of our megaships could probably destroy their entire fleet alone." "Probably is not certainly," Daniel said. "We built these ships based on captured technology we barely understand. We've never tested them in real combat. The Valoran have been fighting wars for thousands of years. So, what's the plan?" Daniel turned back to the window. "We show them what we built, we demonstrate what we can do, and then we give them a choice. Leave us alone, or die trying to conquer us." On Mars, the Colossus began to move. Massive engines that had never been fired pushed her slowly out of her underground hangar, through tunnels wide enough for cities, toward the surface. The ground shook as she rose, and workers on the surface watched in awe as she climbed into the Martian sky like a steel mountain learning to fly. Megan Price sat in her fighter, waiting in the Colossus's launch bay. Around her, hundreds of other pilots did the same. None of them had ever seen real combat. None of them knew if they would survive what was coming. But all of them knew why they were there. For humanity, for home, for the chance to tell the galaxy that they would not be slaves. The Colossus cleared the atmosphere and turned toward the outer planets, where her sisters were gathering. Behind her, Mars grew smaller. And ahead of her, the stars waited. In 58 days, the Valoran would come expecting surrender. They would find something very different. Fleet Commander Vraxith stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the stars blur past. His ship, the Eternal Dominion, was the pride of the Valoran Navy. She had led the conquest of a dozen worlds, and her name was spoken with fear across the Orion Arm. Today, she would add another victory to her record. The human system was just ahead. Vraxith had studied the intelligence reports carefully. A single star, a handful of rocky planets, some gas giants. Nothing remarkable. The humans themselves were equally unremarkable. They had a few orbital stations, a small fleet of patrol ships, and scattered colonies on their neighboring planets. Conquering them would be like stepping on insects. "Commander," his tactical officer reported, "the fleet is in formation. All 247 vessels are ready for translation to normal space." Vraxith nodded slowly. He had brought far more ships than necessary, but the High Council wanted to make a statement. They wanted the humans to see the full power of the hegemony and understand just how hopeless their situation was. Resistance would be not just foolish but unthinkable. "Begin the translation," he ordered. Space rippled and tore, and the Valoran fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. They appeared near the orbit of the 8th planet, a blue giant with rings of ice. Their crystalline hulls caught the distant starlight and glittered like a constellation of deadly jewels. Vraxith looked at his sensors and felt a small glow of satisfaction. Just as expected, the human defenses were laughable. A few patrol ships were fleeing toward the inner system. Some orbital platforms were powering up weapons that could barely scratch his smallest escort vessel. It would be over in hours. "Broadcast the surrender demand," he ordered, "and begin moving the fleet toward the 3rd planet. I want this finished before the next sleep cycle." His communications officer obeyed, and the ancient words of Valoran conquest echoed across the human system. Surrender or die, kneel or be destroyed. The same message that had broken 100 species before. For several long minutes, there was no response. Vraxith felt his patience wearing thin. Perhaps they are too primitive to understand. "Send the message again, in simpler terms." Before the order could be carried out, space itself began to shudder. The first sign was on the gravity sensors. Something massive was approaching, something so heavy that it was bending space-time around it like a stone dropped in water. The readings made no sense. No ship could be that large. No ship could have that much mass. Then the human megaships appeared. They did not emerge from hyperspace. They simply moved out from behind the outer planets where they had been hiding, their engines burning bright, their hulls blocking out the stars behind them. 7 of them, arranged in a wall between the Valoran fleet and their destination. Vraxith stared at his display and felt something he had not experienced in 300 years of warfare. Confusion. "What am I looking at?" he demanded. His tactical officer's voice was shaking. "Ships, Commander. Human ships. But the scale is... The sensors must be malfunctioning. They cannot be that large. Give me accurate readings." "These are accurate, sir. The largest vessel is approximately 8 kilometers in length. Mass readings suggest armor several hundred meters thick. Weapon signatures are... I do not recognize most of them, but they are powerful. Very powerful." Vraxith felt his wings twitch involuntarily. 8 kilometers. His flagship was barely 200 meters. These human vessels dwarfed everything in his fleet combined. They dwarfed anything the hegemony had ever built. The Colossus led the formation, her running lights pulsing red like the heartbeat of an angry god. Beside her, the Titan and the Goliath held position, their weapon ports sliding open to reveal batteries of guns that could fire projectiles the size of buildings. Behind them, the Defiance, the Harbinger, the Ironclad, and the Retribution waited in reserve, each one a mountain of metal and firepower. A transmission cut through the silence. A human face appeared on every screen in the Valoran fleet. It was Admiral Daniel Harper, and he was smiling. "Good evening," he said calmly. "I believe we have some matters to discuss." Vraxith found his voice. This is impossible. You are a primitive species. You could not have built these vessels, and yet here they are. Daniel spread his hands. Ambassador Kelrath gave us 60 days to surrender. We decided to use that time more productively. These are 7 of our new Leviathan-class mega-dreadnoughts. Each one carries enough weapons to glass a planet. Each one is faster and better armored than anything you brought with you today. On the bridge of the Colossus, Megan Price watched the exchange from her fighter. She could see the Velaran fleet on her screens, hundreds of glittering shapes that had seemed so threatening in the intelligence briefings. Now, compared to the ships around her, they looked like toys. Daniel continued speaking. You came here expecting to find slaves. You found something else. Now I'm going to give you the same choice you gave us. Surrender your fleet immediately. Leave our space and never return. Or we will demonstrate exactly what these ships can do. Vraxith's compound eyes narrowed. No one spoke to the hegemony this way. No one threatened a Valoran fleet commander and lived to tell of it. His pride overrode his caution, and he made a decision that would cost him everything. You are bluffing, he said. These ships are props, designed to frighten us. The hegemony does not frighten. We are not bluffing, Daniel replied. But if you need proof, he turned to someone off-screen and nodded. The Titan rotated slowly, bringing her main railgun battery to bear on a small asteroid about 300,000 kilometers away. The asteroid was roughly the size of a Velaran battleship. Then she fired. The projectile moved too fast for normal eyes to see. One moment the asteroid was there, tumbling slowly through space. The next moment, it was gone, replaced by an expanding cloud of dust and fragments. The kinetic energy of the impact registered on sensors across the entire solar system. Secondary shockwaves made nearby moons shudder. Every Valoran officer saw the readings. Every Valoran officer understood what they meant. A single shot from a single gun on one of these human ships had just destroyed a target larger than most of their fleet. And there were 7 ships, and each ship had hundreds of guns. Vraxith stared at the debris cloud where the asteroid had been. His tactical officer was speaking. Something about impossible energy readings and unprecedented destruction. But the words seemed to come from very far away. For the first time in his long career, Fleet Commander Vraxith understood what it felt like to be prey. But he was still Valoran. He was still a warrior. And warriors did not retreat. All ships, he said quietly. Battle formation. Attack. It was the last order he would ever give. The Valoran fleet moved forward like a glittering wave. 247 warships, each one a masterpiece of alien engineering, spread across the darkness in their classic attack pattern. It was a formation that had crushed 100 enemies. It was a formation designed to overwhelm through superior numbers and firepower. Against the human megaships, it looked like a school of fish attacking a group of whales. Admiral Daniel Harper watched the enemy advance from his command station aboard the Colossus. The alien ships were fast and graceful, moving with a beauty that human vessels could never match. But beauty meant nothing in war. Only power mattered, and power was something humanity had in abundance. All ships, he said calmly, hold position. Let them come to us. The tactical display filled with targeting information. Thousands of weapon systems locked onto the approaching enemy, tracking each crystalline hull with cold precision. The Valoran thought they were attacking. In reality, they were swimming into a slaughterhouse. Fleet Commander Vraxith ordered the first strike. Energy beams lanced out from his forward ships, bright columns of light that could have melted through the armor of any vessel in the galaxy. They struck the Colossus directly on her bow, exactly as intended. The massive ship did not even slow down. Her shields absorbed the energy without effort. The alien weapons that had conquered empires splashed against her defenses like water against stone. Inside the Colossus, the crew barely felt the impact. Their sensors registered the attack as a minor energy fluctuation, nothing more. Daniel allowed himself a small smile. Return fire. The Colossus spoke with the voice of thunder. Her railgun batteries opened up in sequence, each one launching projectiles that weighed several tons at speeds that defied belief. The first salvo crossed the distance between the fleets in less than a second. Valoran ships that had survived centuries of warfare died instantly, their crystalline hulls shattering like glass struck by hammers. Explosions bloomed across the enemy formation. A dozen ships vanished in the first 3 seconds. Then another dozen. Then more. The Titan and the Goliath joined the attack, their own weapons adding to the destruction. Missiles streaked through the void by the thousands, each one smart enough to find its own target, each one carrying enough explosives to gut a battleship. The Defiance and the Ironclad pushed forward, their broadsides carving burning lines through the enemy ranks. Vraxith watched his fleet dying and felt something close to despair. His ships were firing back with everything they had, pouring energy into the human vessels from every angle. It made no difference. The megaships absorbed the punishment as if it were nothing. "Concentrate fire on the lead ship," he ordered desperately. "All vessels, focus on the lead ship." 100 Velaron warships turned their weapons on the Colossus. For 10 long seconds, they poured every weapon they had into her hull. The energy would have melted a moon. It would have destroyed a fleet. It barely scratched her paint. Then she rotated slightly, bringing a fresh section of armor to face them, and continued firing. Lieutenant Commander Megan Price led her fighter squadron out of the Colossus's launch bay. Her craft was tiny compared to the giants around her. But she had a job to do. The Valoran command ships were hiding in the center of their formation, coordinating the battle. Without them, the enemy fleet would fall into chaos. "All wings, follow me," she called. "We're going hunting." Her squadron dove into the battle, weaving between explosions and debris. Valoran point defense systems tried to track them, but there was too much chaos. Energy beams meant for fighters struck friendly ships instead. The aliens were panicking, losing coordination, dying by the dozen every minute. Megan found her target, the Eternal Dominion, Vraxith's flagship. It was larger than the other Valoran ships and covered in gold markings that showed its importance. She armed her missiles and lined up her approach. Target locked, firing. 4 missiles streaked toward the flagship. The Valoran tried to shoot them down, but they were too slow. The explosions tore through the crystalline hull, opening it to space. Atmosphere vented in frozen clouds. Flames flickered and died in the vacuum. On the Eternal Dominion's bridge, Vraxith died with his hand still reaching for his weapons console. His last thought was a single word, repeated in disbelief: impossible. With their commander gone, the Valoran fleet fell apart. Some ships tried to retreat, turning toward the edge of the system and running for hyperspace. Others continued fighting, their crews too proud or too terrified to flee. None of it mattered. The Harbinger and the Retribution cut off the escape route, their massive forms blocking the path to freedom. Any ship that tried to run met the same fate as those that stayed to fight. Railgun rounds and missiles filled the darkness, and crystalline hulls shattered everywhere. In 3 hours, it was over. 180 Valoran warships had been reduced to drifting wreckage. The rest had fled into hyperspace, carrying tales of terror to the hegemony. The human fleet had not lost a single vessel. They had barely used a fraction of their ammunition. Daniel Harper surveyed the battlefield from the Colossus's observation deck. Debris floated everywhere, the remains of an empire's pride. Among the wreckage, life pods blinked distress signals. The survivors of the Valoran fleet were begging for rescue. "Have our ships pick up the escape pods," he ordered. "All survivors are to be treated with dignity and respect. They're prisoners of war, not trophies." His officers obeyed. Even in victory, humanity would show that they were not savages. They would prove that they were better than the conquerors who had tried to enslave them. Megan Price landed her fighter in the Colossus's bay and sat for a long moment in her cockpit. Her hands were shaking. She had just helped destroy an alien armada. She had just helped save her species. It did not feel real. Her squadron gathered around her as she climbed out. They were all alive. Every single one of them had made it through. Some were crying, others were laughing. A few simply stood in silence, trying to process what they had experienced. "We did it," someone said. Megan looked up at the hangar ceiling, at the endless metal walls of the ship that had carried them to victory. "We did it," she agreed. "But this isn't over. The hegemony will hear about what happened here. They'll have to decide what to do next. Far away, the survivors of the Valoran fleet were already spreading the news. Messages flew across the galaxy at faster than light speeds. An empire that had never known defeat was learning a new emotion, fear. And somewhere in the darkness, other species were listening. Other civilizations were watching. They had all lived under the hegemony's shadow for thousands of years. Now they were seeing something they had never seen before. Someone had fought back. Someone had won. The galaxy would never be the same. The Valoran High Council had not held an emergency session in over 1,000 years. Their empire was too powerful, too stable, too secure for such things. Problems were handled by subordinates. Threats were crushed before they could grow. The council existed to rule, not to react. But when the survivors of the human campaign reached the homeworld, everything changed. 12 battered warships limped into Valoran space, their crystalline hulls scarred and broken. Their crews told stories that the council could not believe. They spoke of human vessels larger than cities, of weapons that could destroy fleets with single shots, of a battle that had lasted only hours before ending in complete disaster. 247 ships had entered the human system. 12 had returned. The council gathered in their ancient chamber, surrounded by monuments to 10,000 years of conquest. They listened to the reports. They watched the sensor recordings. They saw the massive human ships hanging in the void like metal gods, shrugging off attacks that should have destroyed them. For the first time in their long history, the Valoran did not know what to do. Some members argued for a larger fleet. Send 1,000 ships instead of 200. Bury the humans under sheer numbers. But the tactical projections were clear. The human megaships could destroy entire armadas without taking damage. A larger fleet would only mean more Valoran deaths. Others suggested retreat. Abandon the human sector. Pretend the attack had never happened. But word was already spreading across the galaxy. Other species were hearing the news. If the hegemony showed weakness now, rebellions would ignite on 100 worlds. In the end, they chose the only option that remained: diplomacy. Ambassador Kelrath was sent back to Earth. This time, he did not travel in a small diplomatic vessel. This time, he came alone, on a ship stripped of weapons, carrying a message of peace. The humans met him in orbit, but not at the same station as before. Instead, his ship was guided to dock with the Colossus herself, the flagship of the fleet that had destroyed his people's pride. As he walked through her endless corridors, passing thousands of human crew members who watched him with cold eyes, he understood just how completely the power had shifted. Admiral Daniel Harper and Secretary Lisa Thornton were waiting for him in a conference room. Behind them, a massive window showed Earth floating in the darkness, blue and green, and protected by a wall of steel. Kelrath's wings were folded in the posture of submission. His voice, which had been so arrogant before, was quiet and careful. "The Valoran hegemony wishes to discuss peace," he said. Lisa leaned back in her chair. "That's interesting. A few weeks ago, you gave us 60 days to surrender. You called us primitives. You said we would be useful as slave labor. We were mistaken." "Yes," Daniel agreed. "You were." The negotiations lasted 3 days. The humans made demands that would have been unthinkable before the battle. Full recognition of human sovereignty, trade agreements on equal terms, free passage through hegemony space for human vessels, access to alien technology and scientific knowledge. The Valoran agreed to everything. They had no choice. The human megafleet remained in orbit above Earth throughout the talks, a constant reminder of what would happen if the negotiations failed. Every Valoran in the galaxy knew the truth now. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was something new, something dangerous, something that could not be conquered. When the treaty was finally signed, Ambassador Kelrath transmitted the news to his homeworld. The High Council accepted it without debate. They had lost a fleet and an empire's worth of pride. They would not risk losing more. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy began to change. Other species, long oppressed by the hegemony, started reaching out to humanity. They sent cautious messages, tentative offers of friendship, requests for protection. They had seen what human weapons could do, and they wanted to be on the right side when the next war came. Lisa Thornton became the first human ambassador to the galactic community. She traveled to a dozen alien homeworlds, meeting species that humanity had never imagined. Some were friendly, some were suspicious. All of them treated her with respect, because behind her, always present in their minds, was the knowledge of those 7 ships. Those impossible, terrifying ships that had broken the hegemony's power in a single afternoon. On Mars, Dr. Nathan Cole returned to the underground shipyards. The hangars that had held the first mega-fleet were empty now. But they would not stay that way for long. Construction crews were already assembling the framework for a new generation of vessels, bigger and more powerful than the first. "Do you think we'll need them?" his assistant asked. Nathan looked at the empty space where the Colossus had been born. "There are thousands of species in this galaxy. The Valoran were just the first to find us. Others will come. Some will want to trade, some will want to fight. We need to be ready for both. So we keep building. We keep building. Forever, if we have to." Lieutenant Commander Megan Price stayed aboard the Colossus. She was promoted to full commander after the battle, given her own wing of fighters to lead. The ship had become her home now, and she could not imagine living anywhere else. Sometimes, in the quiet hours between shifts, she would go to the observation deck and look out at the stars. She thought about the future, about all the things humanity might discover and achieve, now that they had taken their place among the galactic powers. And sometimes she thought about the past. About the captured probe that had started everything. About the message it had carried. "You have been found. Prepare to serve." The aliens had meant it as a threat. They had expected humanity to fall to their knees and accept slavery. Instead, humanity had built monsters of metal and fire. They had taught themselves to wage war on a galactic scale. They had met the conquerors in battle and destroyed them utterly. Admiral Daniel Harper retired a year after the war. He lived out his remaining days on a small farm on Earth, watching the stars from his porch each night. He had saved his species. He had changed the course of galactic history. Now he was content to rest. But even in retirement, he kept a communicator by his side, just in case. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity. That fear would keep them safe for now. But peace never lasted forever. Somewhere out there, other empires were watching, calculating, wondering if they could succeed where the Valoran had failed. Let them wonder. Humanity had been found. They had been threatened. They had been given 60 days to surrender. They had used those days to build a fleet that made the void itself tremble, and they would do it again if they had to, because that was what humans did. When they faced extinction, they did not kneel. They did not surrender. They did not accept their fate. They built something terrible, and they won.